Today's guest, Hilary Klassen, co-founder of the Secret HR Society and co-founder and CEO of bestselfy.
People that invest in leadership development programs have a 12% increase in overall productivity across the companies. That's huge in terms of measurements, because ultimately we want to look at performance, right? Or productivity. It's really hard to measure performance, as we know. But when you look at the hard numbers of how the company is performing, it is about what the output of the people are, right? So of course we can look at engagement stats, we can look at, and this is where I have opportunities to learn and grow, everything else that comes into that. Yeah, of course, we want to be able to bring it to you on the job, right? That's why we've created the Leader Lab 1.0 is to be able to do this over a 3 to 5 month period of every 2 weeks you come together, but you're also doing app-based coaching that is for you, less than 10 minutes, right? Is get through some of that in order to upskill yourself and develop who you are. And then be able to come together in groups, because that's so super important. And when we work with companies, it's the collaboration, right? Across the leadership tiers, cross-functionally. Because if I'm the head of product and have no idea what the head of sales is kind of doing all the time, and interestingly enough, we all have the same leadership challenges.
Hilary and I talked about leadership and also that sometimes and often we saw that the HR function or the people function sees itself as a victim, and that we don't really agree with that because there are many things you can do to get out of this role or perspective by doing things in a certain way. And also for leadership, we talked about several patterns and also styles and what is important to create a certain leadership, I would say, concept and pattern in an organization that is enabling the organization, that leaders can run a company. And this episode is more around the early stage company leadership style. So everybody who is interested in that, have fun.
Then you can build trust, and then you can spend less time communicating and more time just getting shit done.
Then I went home and thought about this sentence.
We basically put it on the table.
Hiring takes time. People are trained.
How to objectively judge certain situations.
It's very, 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 very hard to change things.
That was the learning.
Entrepreneurs with empathy.
To the people side.
Good morning, Hilary. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Also fine. So we already had a good pre-discussion of the role of HR in early stage companies. So maybe we can touch base again on it, what we just shortly talked about. So what patterns do you see? Why sometimes maybe it's hard for the HR or people function, especially in early stage companies?
Yeah. So typically the pattern is, and there's this magic numbers. I'm going to throw some things out, and you probably have seen this. Normally companies in earlier stages, I'm talking before Series A, right, is around 50 employees. They're like, oh my goodness, we need an HR manager. And usually there's around 20 to 30, I think, for those companies that we need to do more around building our teams and the people space, etc. They do hire somebody, but it's very administrative. It's not the strategic partner to the founders, the C-level. It's much more around how do we actually make the nuts and bolts, right? How do we do payroll? As you know, you work with many people that are an HR manager, but actually 80% of their job is what? Recruiting. It's like, just hire people. Just hire as many people that you probably need, right? Like that's sort of their mandate from the top is go find them. And then they become successful. And it's interesting because many HR leaders, and over the time, and I've done quite a bit of coaching as well, of helping those leaders become directors, VPs, CHROs, is that progression around, well, I got into the people space, or I want to be an HR person because I want to help people. I want to care. And I think that's actually interesting. And I will be devil's advocate. Every time I hear, I just want to help people, I'm like, oh, this is not then the role for you. Okay. So it isn't about helping. It isn't just about, I have to really be there emotionally from the people because the rest of the business isn't. No, actually every leader, even from the top, should know you build a business and your people are your biggest asset. Right? And how your people interact with customers, because you might have a wonderful idea, but if you can't go and sell it and build it, you don't have a business. right? So that is super important. So, and what do you know about business? How do you help to grow and scale the company, right, with the leaders themselves? And then we get into, so then you have a small team, right, around that 50, maybe one or two people. Of course, somebody's doing payroll and contracts and quite the administrative types of stuff. Then it becomes this, okay, how do we look at our workplace, take things over, and then to go to really, that 80, 90 people, right? And usually then, if they've raised Series A, okay, all right, now we need culture. And every time you hear that, you're like, what? You have a culture, actually. It's not about creating one now. It's you actually have to just live it. And as founders in C-level, and at that point then, you see some change, maybe one or two. Yeah.
What I always see when people say
Yeah.
we need culture, what it actually means is they need certain principles in leadership that feels tangible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that you can then also scale in a certain way through leaders and not through yourself by owning everything.
And I couldn't agree more. And I wish companies, so interesting. We have one customer right now, client, 500 plus people, and, doing well. And exactly this discussion, I told you, I just got off a call, was, I think we need to define a little bit more, what is leadership in our company? I'm like, exactly, because that will continuously, that will evolve, right? It won't necessarily change. It's just going to evolve. And if it's not clear, what are the behaviors from the most senior that we expect? And actually, by the way, there's a big difference, and I do a lot of workshops with execs around what's aspirational and what's real. Mm-hmm. Right? Because they think they're doing it, and you're like, no.
Exactly. And this can be very different for all the different individuals, right? Everybody's maybe has other aspirations, and also the reality looks different in each units.
100%. And there's no cookie cutter approach, right? We don't just wake up. And I think this is what we have to wipe out of so much around what we're doing is this, I asked this at another workshop with HR leaders. Describe the behaviors of great leaders that you've ever had. Imagine what it is. And interesting, do you know what the top two behaviors came out?
No.
After over 100 responses, empathy and coaching. And slightly third was active listening, communication. Mm-hmm. Those are behaviors. Does that have anything to do with being a visionary, taking command? No, right? Everybody, but actually those behaviors that everybody can learn. And that's the difference. Because how you lead and I lead as CEOs of our companies, right, is very different. And it should be. Because you have to be authentic. People
what is your style?
Smell, read. My style is I'm a very high achiever. I like to get a lot of stuff done. My team knows this. They also have the ability to say, Hilary, it's too much. Right? And we check in on each other on that. I see the future. I believe in futuristic as well. Quality for me is really important. So it's not just about getting stuff done, but the level and the detail of how you do that. And to be, very transparent as well. So you need to come to me if you have questions, as I will come to you. And we discuss this. And I try to be as human as possible, right? And I think that's the other side. And I have a individualization strength, which is wonderful. So I think this is why over years, being able to really personalize and understand each person for who they are and what they need, because they do need different things. But I think this is exactly having that. And every single person I hire, I work with, they know that. I have this written out in a user guide. This is how you best work with me. This is what gives me energy. This is what drives me. This is what I do best. And also, this is what might frustrate you. Right? So
that's super interesting, because not many. I saw these memos of individuals way more often now.
Yeah.
And I think this is coming also from a concept in a book from Elad Gil, I think from the High Growth Handbook, where at some point he also described the stages of a founder through a company evolving.
Yeah.
And at some point, you as a founder are just able to excel further or even just grow with the company, to not be the bottleneck, if you hire people that are better into your reporting line and then just let them do their job. And sometimes people also then don't know how to work with each other. And therefore, I think he described this memos to say, okay, the most important thing is just keeping the team together, that they can operate. And this is one framework what you can use, that people know how to approach, especially in terms of hiring, when there are a lot of new people coming in. You don't have the time to get to know each other. You don't have the time to familiarize, but you need to make it work, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
So, interesting. So, okay, Hilary, we already dived now into a bit of a topic, but we did not even did a short introduction. So maybe you can also give us a bit more context about yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you, Thomas. Yes. If you can tell from my accent, I am American. I've been living and working abroad for 18 years. Hard to believe. I spent 10 years at Gallup, and that was really fascinating because I came from a big German company in the aerospace, Lufthansa, in sales and marketing. And I always was fascinated with human behavior. So it got me, but from the customer side. So obviously sales and marketing is around like, oh, right, how do we get to know what you need and really your burning platform, and how do we emotionally be able to sell, right? And close deals. So for me, that was also really great. And somebody said, I like to ask a lot of questions. And I knew after, 4 years of putting butts in seats at a very high price, I was like, I need to probably go into consulting and figure things out. So I went to Gallup. They offered me the role, and I thought I was doing a lot on customer engagement and behavior, which ended up going into a lot of employee engagement and leadership development, talent development, selection. How do we find raw talent, and kind of what we were talking about before, and focus that to build leadership benches and to help companies grow. So lived and worked. I also went into an in-house role at Gallup. For 6 years, I was a director of talent. So really everything ex-US was Europe, actually Middle East, Asia. Go ask Hilary. She'll be able to, and I built different teams and helped support the growth of the company. And then of course,
just one question. What made you move to Europe then?
Actually, the role. They offered me, and the interesting thing is, and I do speak German, as you know, and the GM of Berlin was like, "Great, you speak, this is great." Actually, no, the senior vice president in the US was like, "You need to speak with the GM in Germany. We're building its very new office, come to Berlin." And so we met, and I thought, why not? It was a very startup type of, even with a big company name, is trying to crack the market, right? And I was like, this is super exciting. Let's just go and do it. So, so that's been my journey. But then, of course, the tech, everything was happening in Berlin, and I'm like, okay. And I was doing coaching and a little consulting on the side. I've been a strengths coach for a very long time, so helping a lot of founders and others kind of growing with their careers, so coaching them. And then I moved into ad tech, insurtech, and I've been a coach and consultant for many years until I founded 3 years ago bestselfy, which is really a complete digital coaching platform. It's app-guided coaching with one-on-one coaching, but also with practicing. So doing cohort-based peer sessions and that are coach-led in order to really apply, right, these new behaviors, what we talked about. How can I do this? How does that show up for me? Giving them real situations, scenarios, cases, and being able to work through that. And of course, addressing their challenges, right? That's the most important thing. So with bestselfy, we have the Leader Lab 1.0 and really focusing on helping with the companies build their leadership strengths.
In case you like my show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Before we go into coaching, I wanted to finish up the first topic. So you also said that sometimes there is something expected then from an HR person in an early stage from a founder, but sometimes they then don't know what to deliver. And then we already discussed about some patterns that sometimes maybe the person that is hired into the first HR role maybe does not have extensive experience before. If that's the case, I think it's a big asset, especially for that case, because you can build a lot of best practices or industry standards or whatever behaviors you already saw and anticipate it, right? And second, sometimes the founders did things by themselves initially, and then it's maybe getting annoying, and then they hire somebody, but then the setup is already set up to fail, because then people maybe are just supposed to do the administrative stuff or things from the past, what the founders already know. But for new stuff, it's hard to implement something. And then they jump maybe sometimes even into a victim position. So what is your thought on that?
That happens all the time. And it's sad, because this is where, in working with founding teams and execs, it's like, there's so much that they have to learn to say, you are not the expert in this. Is important to help to shape, as we said, like what are leadership, principles, behaviors that we have to lead by, holding each other accountable. Absolutely. That is your role, right? And how we do that. And this is where you really need to have a strong strategic type of HR person. I mean, I've always gone in to say, don't even call me an HR. I'm basically a internal consultant to try to, at a very senior level, to release things, look at data points, pull the whole picture together to say, you know what, we're at risk here. We need to look at this there. What are we going to do about operational strategic growth, right? If we're thinking about entering new markets, how could this? It's all about that. And and running businesses is constantly about managing risk, right? To be better, and then how do we align this? And definitely, I do see this as, I'm going to get to this communication point, because it's embedded in so much of how HR people really need to be internal and external communicators all the time. So at times too, where, if I was a people director, when I was a people director, which is great. Like, they're like, oh, can you run our all hands meeting? I mean, basically almost to the point that I'm like, okay, this is that, but actually we need other voices to come in here, right? It's something that I was really good at, presenting to 200 people, 300 people, but it was around, we need to set this up that other people, we see that there's this, collective need to address certain things, showcase what we're doing. How do we do this? And also, less of this people working in silos, that we all are a team, right? So that is super important. So these are the things that you're constantly internally pushing, because it's important. And the alignment. And by the way, it's not just internal, it's your brand externally. You know this, when people ask you, why should I work at this company? What is it? Right?
Yes, there need to be, I know what you mean. Yeah, there need to be some kind of a spike.
Yeah, exactly. And many times, it's about not just, the company itself, right, is cool because they have a really cool product or vision or mission, right? I mean, I hear this often. That will only take you so far. Because if you're not working with the people that you need to, grow and develop with, and working on really cool challenges, and it's very clear that you show up every day and you know what is expected of you, that's fundamental. And then you have the opportunities to learn and grow. But actually, one of the strongest drivers to overall engagement, why people want to stay and work on something, is I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's your role, company, to fulfill that.
And how do you get there?
How do you get there? How much time do we have? It's like, absolutely. I mean, in times of working with so many different leaders, and I think the ones that really get it, and I think that's the thing, we have to do a little bit of this smell test, are really the C-level, the founders in the C-level, are they really ready to take that holistic step? To say, not just to say, oh, everything's fine, right? Fine isn't good. You need to establish and create exceptional companies, right? And so to be able to see this and to grow people, I mean, you have to continuously measure what's going on. Speak with people, but put that together. I mean, this is all qualitative, which is tough. Social sciences are not easy. We know that. So it's like, what trends are we seeing? How is this being done? but also being very clear, like, this is what we're doing. This is our roadmap. Interesting. I've come into companies where I'm like, who doesn't have a people roadmap? Who doesn't, that is aligned to the business, right? And making it very open and as transparent as possible. We can get to the transparency, because obviously there are certain things that you can absolutely communicate and you should around what is, the state of where we're going, how we're going, and and viability of what we're going to be doing, to the point of not saying, oh, I heard this the other day at a meeting where it's like, ooh, we kind of just showed people how what our runway is. People didn't even know what that meant, but it was scary. I'm like, oh, they're like, yeah, don't show the runway, right? I mean, it's like, people don't want to know it. We only have 6-7 months in the bank. I mean, this is, you have to provide stability as leaders, which is super important. You have to provide hope, which is about, this is what we're going to be doing. This is why you're important in the role every day. You have to provide compassion. And by the way, I hear this a lot, particularly for execs. They're like, well, Hilary or Klassen, is, that's that soft stuff. We talked about that, right? That people stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but it's also giving people a kick in the butt because they can perform better. That's compassion, is you genuinely care. All right. And then, of course, the trust. So that has to be built.
Foundation, isn't it?
Those are exactly. And actually, those are the foundation. Interesting, in Europe, just because of cultural awareness, etc. It's hard. You can't start with trust necessarily because it takes more time, right? Whereas you can compare other cultures in the US, you tend to trust more. You just do. It's just culturally. And so you need to build that up. So to be able to see all these things, people, if you have, during these times, we're in a recession in Germany, right? It is what it is. We know this. Inflation is astronomical. We're kind of figuring out, companies are trying to right size. And if we're not open and say, okay, this is our plan, this is what we're doing, this is where that stability and hope comes in, right? That we have a plan and we're okay.
That will also be interesting for me to see. You are offering a leadership coaching service product, right? What I saw is that, for instance, in the let's say talent market, that now in a recession, less people hire. And I think that's also positive and healthy to just have a correction. And on the other hand, what I always saw in a time of boom, that people hire like crazy, and always the internal mobility or internal development was really just lacking behind. And I have the feeling now that in a recession, they are opening up more to internal development topics, like, for instance, building career plans, hiring internally, promoting more. Why? Because it's maybe less expensive. And also, you don't have always the urgency of, I don't know, investors or targets, or everything is booming and you need to do everything now at any cost. Yeah. Then maybe internal mobility sometimes was not obvious because it doesn't feel like transactional enough that it makes sense. So how do you see that, and what is your opinion on that internal versus external hiring?
And that is actually the companies that are now really doubled down on how do we build our leadership bench, because the leaders, and I'm going to use leaders, people managers, all right, people that lead teams, we'll just put this way, is super important, because that is going to help the survival of the company, right? It's doing more with less. Exactly what you said. And they have to do that. And they have to invest into the point of saying, because what happens, as you said, you go through, I've gone through doubling a company in a couple months, in terms of scaling and opening offices in different countries, and everything is, you get to that, you're like, all right, but we have to focus on now retaining the right people and developing and recognizing, do we promote from within leaders, or do we need to bring them in, right? Where do we need to go as the company? And that is it's so critical, particularly right now, because those people, even if you've gone through layoffs, right, is you're saying, I want you, I'm retaining, you to do excellent work. And so you're going to be a part of this journey. Interestingly enough, I was speaking with a company out of Boston, and they were telling me, people just graduated from Harvard, MIT, right? And they're like, the reason why they're choosing the company is because they have a leadership and coaching programs. So they said, we know you're coming out with your MBA or whatever, your master's, and we want to hire you, and we're going to want to develop, because we know they don't teach you how to do things such as negotiation and presenting and to do whatever it is in your role. But we're going to make sure that you are doing this. And we want to make sure that, if you like to develop either as an IC, an individual contributor, that's great. Or we put you on a program to identify for you if you want to be a people manager someday. And they're like, oh my God, it's amazing. We're getting all this amazing, for the minimum hires they're doing, amazing talent, but actually it's sending a signal through the whole company too. Because the company's saying, I want to stay here and learn and grow.
Yes. Isn't this more a corporate thing?
What do you mean by corporate?
That they have management programs, training programs, and so on, and have the luxury that they can afford this, because I think it's a cool thing, yeah. But I just saw it more on corporations, even with, let's say, companies that are a bit younger and have even up to 1,000, 2,000 employees. They not even have programs like this. Yeah. Just 10,000, 5,000, 100,000 org size corporations. But that's just my perspective, and I never really deep into that. But how do you see that?
I mean, to your point, I would say it's probably 40% of below Series B actually have some sort of program or some sort of, and I'm really, like, people stop, say, we put you through training, right? We know that training doesn't really work. You go away for a day or two, you come back, and you maybe retain 10%, maybe. It has nothing to do with what you're going to be doing, and to
it's more about the relationships maybe you build there at the training, and then you keep in contact with them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it
people
can be.
with a different mindset and different problem or similar problems.
Right. Which it's better than nothing, right? Almost like, this is where I'm like, better than nothing. So they would fall into that 40%. And those companies that actually do invest see a huge, like, people that invest in leadership development programs have a 12% increase in overall productivity across the companies. That's huge in terms of measurements. Because ultimately, we want to look at performance, right? Or productivity. It's really hard to measure performance, as we know. But when you look at the hard numbers of how the company is performing, it is about what the output of the people are, right? So, of course, we can look at engagement stats. We can look at, and this is where I have opportunities to learn and grow, everything else that comes into that. Yeah, of course, we want to be able to bring it to you on the job, right? That's why we've created the Leader Lab 1.0, is to be able to do this over a 3 to 5 month period of every 2 weeks you come together, but you're also doing app-based coaching that is for you, less than 10 minutes, right? Is get through some of that in order to upskill yourself and develop who you are. And then be able to come together in groups, because that's so super important. And when we work with companies, it's the collaboration, right? Across the leadership tiers, cross-functionally. Because if I'm the head of product and have no idea what the head of sales is kind of doing all the time, and interestingly enough, we all have the same leadership challenges.
What are the challenges?
It just shows up differently. Oh, yes. Interesting. I actually just published a newsletter for bestselfy where I kind of addressed some of that and why we're failing, because of the overall, which is, I think it's quite interesting around, I think for first time, and we'll kind of get there. I think, and I did it around first time managers, right? And some of the bigger challenges is they don't know what is expected of them. Really? What is leading? How do I do this? Which is huge. They don't know how to be able to manage time, which is for first time. Absolutely. All the coaching, hundreds of people that I've coached, that is some of the biggest thing. I have to get stuff done myself, and I need to have one-on-ones with my team, and I need to set direction and priorities and make decisions. That's like part of effective management. And I might not even know what are the KPIs or OKRs of the business? What does it actually mean? They need to learn that. And we tend to just chat people. Oh, you're a great salesperson. Here, you can lead a team. That's always like, let's make sure that they understand what this requires, right? And then, of course, you get into behavior like being able to make decisions, communicate, being able to, we'll get into feedback is being able to really, I think, also develop others. But these are behaviors that you've never probably have done because you've never had the opportunity to lead others. And then all of a sudden you're in there, and then the company fails because they don't provide you with this support, right? And then to continuously tackle, and it's a journey. We don't like to tell them, well, we're going to go down the behavioral change path, as we know that you have to commit to it around what the goals and habit creation. But it's a huge, and the approach is understanding your strengths. So when you asked me before, who are you, Hilary, as a leader, and what are your strengths? You have to be so crystal clear, or else you can't help your team and be able to create a team that's going to do fantastic work, right? So you have to be self-aware. And that continues to grow as you have different challenges and everything else. But it's like, how do I tap into really doing what I do best in my natural flow, right? My zone, my leadership zone.
In case you have any feedback or anything you want to share with me, please send me an email on thomas@peoplewise.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. And in case you really enjoy the show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. I think another problem is a lot of behaviors that brings you to the position, to the pole position to become a manager are then not taking you to the pole position of being a good manager.
Yeah. Right? And, and this is exactly, and, in our startup world and scaling companies, et cetera. I mean, it's ironic that we actually say, oh, everybody's a leader. And I'll just start with that. There's a big difference between a leader and a manager, right? And interesting, you can be a leader and you don't ever have to manage people. But we call them all leaders. So it's like, you're a leader. It's scary. I actually feel like most people managers are like, how do I do this? And when you work with them, it's amazing for those people because they also haven't quite formed yet, kind of who they are and how they want to transition from being a peer to a manager. Right. And it doesn't just happen overnight, but we can shortcut that. Right. And this is what we put out there in terms of the lab and the experimentation of helping people operate in a safe space to say, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Because guess what? You don't. But we pretend we do know everything. Right. Or, okay, I can manage it. And in reality, they go home and they're like, or they carry this. I mean, and there's so many things about, even how you do things, businesses, we can talk about even how to manage layoffs to everything. I mean, that is your role as a manager. That's not an HR decision, by the way. Oh. If you have to look at your team and say, I need to keep, 60%, what's happening to the other 40, you better have a good plan.
Definitely. So that would be a good topic for maybe another topic deep dive. I also do this sometimes with several guests with different roles and opinions on one topic, and then do a episode around the topic. So maybe we can follow up on that. So what are some recommendations you can give me in terms of guests? So what is somebody I don't know, but who I should interview next?
Ooh, lots of people. I mean, there's specific topics. Are there specific things?
No, top of mind. What's top of mind on your end? Everything. Maybe let's stick a bit into the leadership side. Can also be
absolutely.
Managers, not from the HR people field, just with a strong opinion or with a certain perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, so there's a couple, and I'm going to shamelessly promote women. I actually think you should interview CEOs of companies. So there's a couple of people, friends of mine, that are CEOs of companies, and ask them their position around also being a woman in leadership, right? And also how they shape their teams. So I am happy to, I know CEO of RayPay, of FinLeap. So also quite interesting topics, because I think that would be a great perspective.
Yes.
Right.
Let's do it.
And what are they doing? Yeah. So I'm happy Nina or Nina. Yeah, exactly. Is to be able to kind of put that out there. And the other, and do you know Julia Denberger too? She's a coach consultant with a lot of for basically companies.
Always interesting to see somebody who has the holistic perspective as a outsider, right?
Yeah.
And also,
yeah,
so
exactly.
I think
or Inka, my she's she had a. Yeah, sorry.
No, because the podcast started more from a people function, but I want to make it more broader from different perspectives and angles, because first I wanted to niche down a bit, that it's easier to get it ramped up, and also having a certain focus topic, right? And then now it's forming more around, certain roles, certain levels, certain perspectives, and is not just dedicated to a people function itself.
Exactly. No, that's absolutely. And this is where I think is so fascinating around, what's the take? I can also hook you up with one of our advisors who was CHRO of a, 20,000 person company, knows the space very well. He's in Silicon Valley, and can give you also a very different perspective of outside of our European bubble. So, and John's great. He's a great storyteller, and gives just a really great understanding. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, Hilary, that was really nice. So we need to cut it now, because I also promised to myself and to my listeners that I cut it down from 60 to around 30 minutes. And this is where we are now. But I think we have enough material for another topic at some point, where we talk about certain topics that are just burning right now, because I want to publish them in between the episodes.
Yeah, perfect. And thank you for doing this in English, by the way, because it helps me for my reach. So I was like, oh, wait, we didn't decide if we're doing it in German. I'm going to be shamelessly just do it in English, because I have a much international, international audience. So, which I've done podcasts before, but I'm like, this is great.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Have a good weekend ahead too.